injection causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Talk to your doctor and visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
Mary Wollstonecraft. Let me begin with a conversation I overheard when I was in college. The year was 1992. The speaker was probably one of my guardian angel / Italian professors, or maybe it was a visiting professor or one of my friends. Women aren't naturally inferior, they were saying. They have just been boxed into a corner by society. Throughout history, they have not been given equal access to education, and even when they have, they've been pushed toward frivolous things, pushed away from math and science and medicine and law and business, and toward less serious and less threatening topics. They're taught to hide their intelligence, to be feminine, not to be assertive or confrontational, feminines in quotes, by the way, to be ladylike, to smile and nod and look pretty. And when they've risen up to overcome this, they're treated like monsters, called names, told they're being bitchy or catty or shrill. Your voice just grates, says society. You complain too much. No one wants to hear this. No one wants to hear you. The year, as I said, was 1992, and every argument in this conversation could have come from the lips or the pen of Mary Wollstonecraft, who was writing the same things with equal passion and urgency in 1792, 200 years ahead of her time. Or maybe we should say that 1992 was 200 years late, at least 200 years. So today's role for women is another topic altogether. Let's go back to the late 18th century. Who was this lone voice, this prophet? What gave her the courage and the conviction? Mary Wollstonecraft was born in April of 1759, the second of 7 children. Her father was one of those people who inherited money and squandered it, trying to be a farmer when he didn't know how, investing in schemes that didn't pan out. He would get drunk and abuse his wife. As a teenager, Mary used to lie outside her mother's bedroom door to protect her mother from her father's violence. From a young age, Mary fought for women against the brutish behavior of the men around them. All this came at a cost. It stepped on toes, damaged relationships, earned the opprobrium of quote-unquote polite society, which was polite within the framework of patriarchy. To be polite meant not challenging the status quo. But Wollstonecraft said, well, who is this status quo helping? Why not challenge the status quo when it's this lopsided? She had at least 2 deep friendships with other women. Jane Arden, the daughter of an amateur, self-styled intellectual, and Fanny Blood, an illustrator. Wollstonecraft left home in her late teens and worked for a few years as an assistant to a widow, but they didn't get along well. And after Wollstonecraft returned home to help her mother, who was ill and dying, she looked for new opportunities. She moved in with Fanny Blood's family, a fascinating period that our guest is going to talk about a bit today, so I'll leave that alone for now. Fanny Blood died in 1785, when Wollstonecraft was about 26, and although she was devastated, it was in the aftermath of this event that her career as a writer and thinker took off. For the next 10 or so years, her life was full of one triumph after another, and also one heartbreak after another. At least the triumphs appear like triumphs to us in retrospect. It seems they perhaps did not feel all that triumphant to Mary. She was successful but forever controversial, earning as much criticism and harsh judgment as admiration from the classes of people who were upset by her advanced views and what Woolf later called her, quote, experiments in living, end quote. What did this mean? Well, she and her young friends had already imagined their way into a world without men. Here's how they would do it, they thought and discussed. Or not without men, but not under the tyranny of men, avoiding the worst of it, avoiding marriage, for one thing. Drawing upon her experience as a governess, she wrote Thoughts on the Education of Daughters. She wrote novels. She found work as a translator. This was one of those experiments, seeking to earn a living as a writer rather than a teacher or governess, a pretty radical step for a woman in her day, in her position. It's a new genus, she told her sister. I will be the first. She wrote reviews. She made friends with Thomas Paine and other intellectuals. She had a relationship with a married artist named Henry Fuseli. In 1792, she went to France to see the aftermath of the French Revolution. This was already a topic that had made her famous. So let's back up for a moment. We're building toward her masterpiece, by the way. In 1789, the French Revolution changed everything. Americans may be surprised to hear that it was the French Revolution, not the earlier American Revolution, that truly transformed the geopolitical world. The American Revolution was a crack that would later spider its way into something big. The French Revolution was a chasm, monumental from the beginning, the sort of change that occurs when a continent cracks in half. In 1790, the conservative Edmund Burke wrote his classic work, Reflections on the Revolution in France. Wollstonecraft was enraged. She spent a month writing a rebuttal, which she called A Vindication of the Rights of Men. At first, this was published anonymously, but her name was revealed with the second edition. One can imagine the backlash to this work, published by a woman and arguing from within the monarchy of England, that the French Revolution was a triumph of the right people. Burke said Marie Antoinette was an elegant symbol of the French regime, quote, surrounded by furies from hell in the abused shape of the vilest of women, end quote. Vile women, Wollstonecraft scoffed at this. Women who earned their money by selling vegetables and fish, she said, who were never allowed to be educated. This angry throng that Burke condescends to, well, what had that regime ever done for them? What was this queen doing, other than demanding their love and fealty as her birthright? Enjoy your lives, peasants. Do try to be civil. Do try to be polite. Do try to be grateful. Wollstonecraft headed to France, where she argued with the French revolutionaries that they should educate girls as well as boys. She also had an affair with an American named Gilbert Imlay. They slept together, even though they weren't married, leading to a pregnancy. All of this potentially scandalous in the era, of course. Imlay was kind of a wild guy, a diplomat, an opportunist who wrote novels and who used the British blockade to help make him some money. Wollstonecraft was at risk now, so Imlay lied to the embassy and said they were married, which meant that Wollstonecraft was an American citizen, which protected her while she was in Paris. Many of her fellow Brits were arrested and thrown in prison, and a few were even executed. Her relationship with Imlay fell apart. She may have attempted suicide at one point, but it appears that Imlay saved her from what may have been an overdose of laudanum. She traveled and wrote travel narratives. Finally, she returned to England. Still in love with Imlay, she jumped into the River Thames to drown herself, but a stranger jumped in and rescued her. She was writing again now, but as her previous experience had taught her, the reception of her as a woman writing was different from how it had been when she was anonymous and assumed to be a man. Now her writing was viewed as full of passion rather than reason. Those who were on her side, though, whether they started there before they read or were persuaded by the force of her arguments, appreciated her writing. One man said her travel book about a trip to Scandinavia could have been written to make a man in love with its author. His name was William Godwin, and although the two of them had argued in the past, they now fell in love. Both of them were opposed to marriage politically. Godwin had argued that it should be abolished. But when Mary became pregnant, they decided that they would do it, get married to help the infant. Unfortunately, the marriage was doomed, happy and stable, but doomed to be short-lived. After giving birth to their child, a daughter, Wollstonecraft only had a few days left to live. She died of septicemia at the age of 38. Let's talk about two legacies. We jumped right over her major work, written in 1792 when she was 33. This was in direct response to Talleyrand and the report on education that he delivered to the French National Assembly. Men are destined to live on the stage of the world, he wrote. The paternal home is better for the education of women. They have less need to learn to deal with the interests of others than to accustom themselves to a calm and secluded life, end quote. Wollstonecraft responded with an 87,000-word essay full of passion and compassion, reason and rationality, literally sense and sensibility. Her foes in the essay are those like Rousseau, who argued that women should be raised and educated to serve men. Men's pleasure would be their occupation. The men will be happiest that way. All kinds of arguments were advanced to suggest that this was the natural order, God's plan, the best design, biologically determined. Wollstonecraft cast all this aside. This is a distortion. It's this way only if we fail to see the truth, was her view, and furthermore, it's destructive. My main argument, she wrote, is built on this simple principle, that if woman be not prepared by education to become the companion of man, she will stop the progress of knowledge and virtue, for truth must be common to all, end quote. She also noted that men were held to a different standard, just given a pass for conduct, that in women would be viewed critically. The other legacy, of course, is that daughter of hers. Mary Shelley grew up as a thinker herself, also someone who didn't mind living in experimental ways, and whose work, Frankenstein and other books, were essential in the history of science fiction and literature in general. There's no one quite like Mary Shelley in the history of literature, and Wollstonecraft too, for that matter. The two of them stand alone. Okay. We have just scratched the surface with Wollstonecraft and her writings. Let's save that for another day so we can bring out our guest, Samantha Silva. We'll hear more from her about her approach to writing novels, her immersion in the world of Wollstonecraft, and the pleasures and insights that her novel, Love and Fury, can give to the rest of us. We will have that conversation after this.
This episode is brought to you by Ulta Beauty. It's never too early to get a head start on your holiday gift list, even if it's your name at the very top. Spark a little joy in your life and the lives of your favorite people with something special for Ulta Beauty's wide selection of skincare, makeup, hair care, and fragrances. The gift is just the beginning. Shop in store or buy online and pick up in store today.
Walmart Plus members save on meeting up with friends. Save on having them over for dinner with free delivery with no hidden fees or markups. That's groceries plus napkins plus that vegetable chopper to make things a bit easier. Plus, members save on gas to go meet them in their neck of the woods. Plus, when you're ready for the ultimate sign of friendship, start a show together with your included Paramount Plus.
The History of Literature podcast is a member of the Podglomerate Network and LitHub Radio.
Walmart Plus members save on meeting up with friends. Save on having them over
By Ulta Beauty. It's
Long. Tristram Shandy did not last. It might be the most mistaken literary opinion he ever expressed. 200 and almost 50 years later, the book is still respected. Centaur Classics ranked it number 26 on their list of the 100 greatest novels ever written. Entertainment Weekly had it as 89th. The BBC judged it to be the 47th greatest British novel ever. It was more popular with the 100 Spanish authors consulted by the newspaper El País, who ranked it number 11. British newspapers go even farther. The Telegraph ranked it 20th, The Observer had it as 7th, and The Guardian put it at 6th. We're talking, of course, about the life and opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman, by Lawrence Sterne. We look at one of the earliest examples of an avant-garde novel today on the history of literature. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Jack Wilson. We're getting a lot of warm and wonderful feedback to our episode with Yang Wang from last week. I listened as if I were hypnotized, wrote one listener. Entrancing, mesmerizing. I've never heard anyone discuss censorship and its effect on the human mind in quite such a way. That's the kind of comments we're getting. It was a true highlight, and I hope you have time to catch that one. Yang Wang, novelist, talking with me about Middlemarch. The History of Literature podcast
and affiliates. Premium is for state minimum liability coverage and excludes state fees and taxes. Rate not available.
Start a 30-day free.
Oh, dos to, not dos cho. Hey, I'm doing my best. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I don't want to hurt your ears or your feelings. I had a friend once who was a gentle German, the gentlest possible person you can imagine. And we were playing a party game where one person would leave the room and we would choose a person to be the secret person. And then the person who had left the room would come back and ask questions about the secret person and we would all answer. And the person would try to guess who it was that we had chosen. Like the person would ask, what kind of food is the secret person? And we would all say, someone would say steak or someone would say chicken or apple pie or whatever. You try to give clues, hints. The person would try to guess. You're talking about so-and-so. Anyway, the question was something about what kind of natural phenomenon is this person? And the gentle German had to describe himself. And he said, a cloud. And the guesser asked a follow-up question, what kind of cloud? And he said, a flimsy cloud. A cloud that doesn't hurt anybody. That's me, people. I'm not one of those badass clouds that hides behind corners and hits you over the head and takes your money. I'm a flimsy cloud. A cloud that doesn't hurt anybody or doesn't want to hurt anybody anyway. So yes, dos to ski. That's what I'll try to do from now on. That's what I was reading. Crime and Punishment while heading through China. On those trains and on those buses, I had Proust on my lap much of the time. So I'm not as reliable as, say, a journalist would be. I was a cloud. And my head was in the clouds most of the time. I thought I could feel the aftermath of trauma. But that could have been coming out of my reading. I'd read all about the Cultural Revolution, which was horrifying. China's great legacy of teachers and respect for teachers, starting with Confucius, or at least reaching back to Confucius, coming all the way to the present day. I felt that in Taiwan, for sure. Those students had much more respect for teachers than the students I had encountered in the United States. They were paid better. They were treated better. The parents appreciated them more. Society appreciated them more, which I took as directly inherited from China. And then you read reports of the Cultural Revolution and what happened then. When things went upside down. They went crazy. And all that respect for teachers was turned inside out, cast aside. Teachers were targets. There were many other atrocities and horrors as well. We don't need to go into all of that. It's not a history lesson here. I just want to give you some context for our guest. Yang Wang came from that world. That was the world she was born into, right in the middle of the Cultural Revolution. She knows it far better than I ever could. She left in those early years when things were starting to open up around the same time that I went to China. In fact, I was there visiting. For her, it was harder. It was not easy to visit. It was not easy to leave. She left on a science. You could leave on a science or technology mission program of advancement. In her case, it was to study engineering abroad, and she did. And yet, while she was studying engineering, with that engineering brain of hers, literature took hold of her. And she found, as we heard in the snippet at the start of the show, that her brain was hardwired a certain way. The censorship of the Chinese government had led to self-censorship, and her mind did not permit her a kind of freedom of not just expression, a freedom of thought. Writers in her native land, China, were getting around censorship, but they had to be evasive, they had to be elliptical, they had to be sly, they could not be direct. And then she read Western novels, from Western civilization, America, Europe. Great writers who were direct, who weren't writing under that restriction, and English was becoming an escape for her too. You'll hear all of that as she describes it. It's a wonderful glimpse at her and at her journey, but also at literature, which can be powerful for all of us who are searching for meaning. I'm impressed by George Eliot for the way she takes on the human condition. I find it bracing and fortifying and full of life and full of meaning. She deals with grief, honestly. She deals with success and failure, honestly. She deals with marriage and frustration and getting older and life itself with so much honesty. It's invigorating. And to hear from someone like Yang Wang, who came from a place where her own language had become not a tool for exploration, but a tool that didn't work. Language should work like a platform or a door, a springboard, something that can launch your mind into the farthest realms and accompany you as you experience everything about this world, what it means to be here and to be alive. And to think that language is faulty, that it's pushing you in a particular direction, that it's closing things off rather than opening them up. Well, this is someone I needed to talk to. Find out what things had been like for her. Yang Wang, that's why she's here. That's what she's here to do today. Bring us this news. Yang Wang. I'm not sure what kind of cloud she'd be. A strong one, I would say. A resilient cloud. Solid. Substantive. But also beautiful and airy. Floating in the sky. Rising above. And lit up with sunshine and grace. Okay. I hope Yang doesn't mind that we took a swerve there, speculated on what she'd be like as a cloud. Let's hear from Yang. First, she's going to read us an essay that she prepared on anti-Asian hatred from a storyteller's and immigrant's perspective.